Hi. Again, welcome to everyone. We are so glad that you're here for the 2024 version of our tax program with Judy Strauss. Uh, 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 I'm sorry. She is the owner, uh, of Strauss Taxes and has been doing this program at the library for more years than either one of us would care to think about. But I will turn this over to Judy and we'll get going.
Thank you, Karen. First of all, I am really excited to be here. And if some of you want to turn on your screen so I can see you, I would be absolutely thrilled because one of the things I missed, and some of you know me and some of you don't, but I actually lived and raised my family in Downers Grove since 1969. And after my husband died, and I had a house in Downers Grove behind the Jewel on 62nd Street where I ran my office. And so I'd run into clients at the Jewel and definitely at the library. And I always did all of these workshops in person, which I loved. After my husband died, we had a condominium in Chicago, and I said, I really want to be where most of my friends are, and a wonderful, wonderful young family,
Otherwise, click it back
young
and
children
then click on here.
have my house. And so I am here. I am still serving all of my clients in the suburbs, and I am still working. My office manager, who many of you know, Beth Austin, drives into the city, and we work with clients. Either you'll hear me talk about it, how we work with you, if you wanted to become clients. Part of the reason I love to do this is Downers Grove was my home from 1969 to 2021. And the library was one of the most wonderful places in my life. So this is a give back to my home. What I want to talk about tonight, and I have a lot of things to talk about, and I'll be happy to answer your questions either in the chat or you can call me tomorrow when this is all over if I can't answer them. I'm going to talk about what's going on with taxes. I'll be talking about not quite as many changes as in some past years, but there's still huge amount going on. And part of the reason I want you to listen to this carefully, and I mean really carefully, this isn't a political statement, but most of the laws that I will be talking about are sunsetting after the next election, which means whoever is elected president and whoever is in charge of Congress, our laws will be bound to change in 2025. And so it's really important to listen to what things are. I have absolutely no idea what they will be, but I do want to tell you that it's important to sort of listen. Okay. And as I said, I'm watching the chat if you have questions. So the first thing that I want to tell you, and people, I will tell you, nobody likes to pay taxes. I talked to a woman today who moved to Florida, and I told her, which I will tell you, that she owed a little bit of money. And she said to me, oh my God, I didn't think I was going to owe any taxes. And I said, when you make more money, you pay more taxes. On the other hand, these are the lowest rates that I, who have been doing taxes for over 50 years, have ever seen. By far, they are the lowest rates. There are also really low rates for what are called qualified dividends from stock and long-term capital gains if you sell a stock or a mutual fund. There is a difference between qualified dividends and capital gains versus what I'm going to be calling ordinary income. Ordinary income is income from interest. It is income from pensions. it is income from Social Security, it is income from wages. But qualified dividends and long-term capital gains have a much lower rate, sometimes 0, sometimes 15, usually the maximum is 20. The per child credit, and most of us tend older, me too, is still $2,000 per child under the age of 17. There was a larger child credit during the pandemic. And right now on the table in Congress is a small increase in the per child credit. God knows if it's going to pass, and if it passes, it will probably be retroactive to 23, but we do not know. Now, one of the things that's very different, and you need to hear this because this is kind of complicated to say the least. Many of us are above a certain age, and many of us are required to take out money from our IRAs. Okay? Way back when, and for years, the law said the following, that when in the year that you turned 70 and a half, you had to start taking out what we called a required minimum distribution. They didn't want you to keep the money in your retirement account or your IRA. That required minimum distribution is based upon two things. It's based upon the value of all of your IRAs at the very end of the year, 12/31/2023, and a table that the IRS has, which is a life expectancy table. So what it used to be was 70 and a half, and life expectancy was 27.4 years. And that would tell you what you absolutely drop dead had to take out. Okay? They changed the law because they were worried people were worried that they might run out of money. So what they said is if you turned 72 last year, okay, you had to start taking money out in 2023. If you turned 73 in 2024, then you have to start taking them out in 24. So it's going up a little bit. It went from 70 and a half to 72, and now it's 73. They also changed the table so that it stretches a little bit longer. If you have more than one IRA, you can take the money out of one of them, or you can take the RMD out of each one. But you have to remember to take it out. Usually they tell you about and remind you to take it out. And if you're a client of Strauss Tax Service, we send you little pink postcards that say, don't forget to take out your required minimum distribution. Now, there's something else that's real important. Lots of people have huge amounts of money in IRAs, and when they die, the laws change. So that when my husband passed away and I inherited his IRA, I was his spouse. I was allowed to take it out a little bit at a time over my life expectancy. That's only for a spouse. So that if something, God forbid, happens to me and my children inherit that IRA has to be completely liquidated over 10 years. I'm going to say that again. It has to be completely liquidated, whether you have $100,000 or $2 million. It has to be completely liquidated over 10 years. And that's a very important thing. Okay, you can't let it, right now, you can let it sit there, but if you let it sit there till year 10, then you have to take it all out. Okay, and there are pretty big penalties for not taking out what you're required to take out. Okay, the IRS has never enforced those penalties, but now they might. So it's really important to know how much your R&D is and then make sure you take it out. Now, the crazy thing is, and you'll hear this a couple of times as I talk today, your RMD is based upon, okay, the value of your IRAs at the very end of the year. In 2022, the stock market went up and then it went down at the end of the year. So that many of us had a much smaller IRA RMD to take out in 2023 than the year before. This past year, the stock market has been amazingly good. And when you get a notice, or when I figure your required minimum distribution, the amount I had to take out, and I'm not rich, but I have a pretty good sized IRA, is $15,000 more than the year before. Okay? So it turns out to be a lot because it's based upon the value. Even if the value was high in December and then it dropped, you're talking about the date from December. So that's really important. Something else that's very important to listen to, and one of the best ways to save taxes now, I guess I want to go back for a minute. The other thing that they did, which is still in effect through this year and maybe next year, we all used to itemize our deductions. We used to have medical, we used to have taxes, we used to have mortgage interest if we had a mortgage, we used to have charities, okay? In 2017, they doubled the standard deduction and they got rid of all the exemptions. So many of us haven't been itemizing. And what's happened is many people say, well, I really like to donate to charity, whether it be my church or the Salvation Army or the Red Cross or the DuPage Food Depository, whatever it be. But I really liked getting a tax deduction. And if I'm not going to get a tax deduction, maybe I'm not going to, donate as much. Well, this is an important thing out of your IRAs. It started in 2017. It is called a qualified charitable contribution. And here's how it works, okay? You tell the trustee of your IRA, whether it be Schwab or Morgan Stanley or Fidelity or Vanguard or whoever it is, and you tell them that instead of giving money to your church, $10 a week or $50 a week or whatever you give them the money in one lump sum, and the IRA trustee writes a check to the charity directly from your IRA to the charity. What happens is a very important thing, and it could be any charity as long as it's a charity, okay? And you can give to 1, you can give to 5, you can give to 15, it doesn't matter, okay? What's important is this: when you get your form from your IRA distribution, it's on a form called a 1099-R, like a pension or any other retirement. And it'll have the gross number over here, and it'll have the taxable number over here. On my computer, when I do your taxes, or you do your taxes, there's a little box at the bottom that says qualified charitable contributions. I open up that box and I list St. Mary's Church, $3,000. I list the Downers Grove Library, $500. What happens on your tax return is the total of those QCDs gets subtracted from the amount that shows up as taxable. And on your 1040, next to that line, there'll be a thing that'll say QCD, which stands for Qualified Charitable Distributions. That's a very important thing because it saves you a lot of taxes. Okay? And I tell people to make sure to do that. Okay? Because first of all, the charities need the money, and if you're giving it away anyway, why not give it away that way? It becomes substantially more tax effective. Okay? And so you need to look at that. We'll also talk about something else that changed, which is an important thing, and this isn't a tax law, but this is your Social Security.
Judy,
So-
I'm going to interject really quick because we have a question in the chat.
Okay, Social Security went up 8.7%. Oh, if I take my RMD in December, should I do estimated tax before the RMD is taken? That is a good question. Okay, so you can do a couple of things. The tax laws say that you're required to pay 90% of the tax during the calendar year. Otherwise, for the IRS, you might get a really small penalty. I don't worry about penalties. It isn't huge, but it's better to pay a little bit at a time so you don't come back in April and say, oh my God, how do I owe all this money? So one of the things that we do is we tell people how much their RMD is, and you can also have them withhold tax from your RMD. So you can figure out how much is your QCD. I have lots of clients that don't like paying quarterly taxes, and we figure out how much we can withhold from their required minimum distribution. So the answer is you don't have to pay the estimated taxes before, okay? But they really want you, and it's better. You don't like, and I don't like, coming to tax time and saying, oh my God, how come I owe all this money? Because if I owe it in April for last year, and then I have to pay estimated taxes for next year, it becomes like a double whammy. So we check all the time for people. A lot of people forget to pay estimated taxes. I have people that forget. We call them up, we send them postcards, we remind them, but it's important to make sure that you pay them. Okay, people ask, what do I do with my RMD? Well, that's sort of a tax question and sort of isn't. I'll tell you what I think. First of all, many of us have worked our whole lives to save all this money. And some of us have more money than we ever thought we'd have. So this is not a tax answer. This is an answer from my heart. I gave some of my RMD to my grandson for a wedding present. Okay, I gave some of it to charity. I went on a trip. Okay, I did some remodeling in my condo. And some of it I left and put it back in my regular account. Okay, or maybe you want to buy something that you always wanted that you thought, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't. But why not? You only live once. And I know lots of people get, especially older people, get really, really scared about running out of money. But one of the things, if your stuff is invested well, you take it out and the next year it seems to be almost the same as where it was before, because it's been managed or it's growing, because the stock market this year did very well. So you can do whatever you want with it. It's totally up to you. The only thing that's important is that it's taxable. So you want to make sure that you paid the tax before you give it away and then wonder where the tax is. Okay, so that's the RMD stuff, and that's very tricky. Okay, usually when I do people's taxes, I ask them to bring me what their year-end values are, and we figure out what their RMD is supposed to be, so they know, and maybe they want to take it out of the bank instead of out of Vanguard or Fidelity where it's doing better. So that's pretty important. Something else is pretty important, and this has changed or hasn't changed, but it changed under President Obama. And that's something that is nicknamed Obamacare. Okay, we'll talk at the end of this talk about medical deductions, but there are a lot of people that really have trouble paying for their insurance and they don't have very much money. And so Obamacare was put into place designed to create subsidies for people who didn't have a very high income to get good insurance. One of the things that I'm really pleased about, so if you sign up on the website for Obamacare, you can tell them what you think your income is going to be. And instead of the premium being this big, you get a subsidy and your premium is much smaller. And you're able to reconcile that on your tax return. You get a form from Obamacare called the 1095-A, and we have to reconcile it on your tax return. But one of the things that's very cool is that over 20.3 million people have signed up for Obamacare in 2024. That is more than 8 million more than before President Biden took office. And I'm not saying whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat, I'm saying we're really helping people get good medical care. Because if you don't have good insurance, you could easily go broke really fast. So we take the form from Obamacare. It's called the 1095-A, and we reconcile it with your income. And if the subsidy isn't enough of a subsidy, then you get more of a tax break. If you had much higher income than you thought you were going to have, you might have to pay back some of the subsidy, but that's pretty important. Okay? The last thing that I want to tell you is Illinois. And Illinois did something really, I won't call it stinky, I would have to call it sneaky. Illinois raised our state tax. It started out at 2.5% to 3% back in 1969 when I started doing taxes. They raised it to 3.5%, and then they raised it in the year 2000 to 4.95%. One of the things, the federal tax is a graduated tax. Illinois is a straight flat tax. Okay? And so to counterbalance the increase in the tax rate, they increased the standard deduction exemption for each one of us a little bit every single year. Okay? And so it went up $25 or $50 for each person, and then a little bit more if you're over 65. I didn't know, and you probably won't know until you look at your tax return, okay, that Illinois, in their wonderful way in Springfield, decided to freeze the exemption. It isn't going up in 2023. And so what that means is each one of us might get a $5 or $10 increase in the state of Illinois, but if you multiply it by the millions and millions of people in Illinois, it's a tax increase. And it happened in July in Springfield. I didn't know about it until about 3 weeks ago. So that's interesting. Okay, somebody asked a question. I'm 71 and single, and I have sold and bought a condo next year. Okay, I'm going to hold that question till later, and I will explain how house sales work, but I will answer that question because that's a good question, a very important question, because a lot of people are either selling their own house or they're selling a second house in 2023 or 2024. Okay, so those are the things that are sort of stayed the same. Here are some things that are different. I think a very big difference, and it's not a tax law difference, but it is a difference. Lots of us, including me, feel very comfortable keeping money in the bank. I like to have what I call a cash stash in the bank. I have money invested in Fidelity and in other places, but I like to know that the money's available and I can touch it, or I can walk into the bank and look at it, or look at it online and know that I have it. A lot of that money that we had in the bank never earned very much interest. It earned 0.5%, it earned 1%. Last year, most of that money earned 5%. So if you look at your interest earned from the banks or from a mutual fund that was invested in bonds or in treasury notes, the amount last year was 2 years ago was this big, and the amount this year is this big. I had somebody that I just finished, and she earned $6,000 more interest this year than she did last year. With the same amount of money in the bank, she just earned more interest. And that interest is taxed as ordinary income, and you're going to be surprised at how much it is. Most of us, I have clients that go to different banks and they look at the CDs, and when one CD comes due, they go to another bank and get a bigger CD, but you will be surprised at the amount of interest that shows up in 2023. I expect that people are going to be very surprised. The other surprise, and this has been going on for several years, if you invested in American Funds or Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard, and you are in mutual funds, those mutual funds are different than individual stocks. If I own an individual stock, I can decide when I'm going to buy it, and I can decide when I'm going to sell it. And the increase in value between when I bought it and when I sell it is called unrealized gain until I sell it. Okay? When I sell it, as I told you, it's usually called long-term capital gains taxed at a lower tax rate. All right? If you own money in a mutual fund, the fund manager decides when they're going to sell, not you. So last year, when the stock market was really high at the end of the year, a lot of people thought the market might go down in January, and you're going to see something on your investment report called long-term capital gains. Those are gains that the fund manager sold in the mutual fund, not you. They're taxable, even though the money is sitting in your investment account. It's not sitting in your pocket. It's not sitting in your checkbook. It's not sitting in your bank. It's sitting in your investment account. And whether you can touch it or not, it's money that you didn't have before they sold. Those are long-term capital gains. Those have been problems for several years, and we expect them to be problems now. Often they are sold in December, and we never know what's going to happen. And especially if you have an account that's being managed by somebody, often they take long-term capital gains at the end of the year, okay, to make them look good. And then all of a sudden, you don't feel any richer, but you have all these capital gains to pay taxes on. I'm not going to say whether I think that's a good idea or not, but if you're in a mutual fund, that's often what happens. The next thing that changed, okay, is Social Security. And it didn't change badly, but this is what's going on, and we're going to marry that with the interest that I just talked about. So in 2023, we had a huge amount of inflation. You and I all know every time we went to the grocery store and tried to check out, we thought we were going to choke. I did. And I don't have any kids at home. I can't even imagine what food costs are for a family with growing kids. I absolutely can't imagine. But because the increase in Social Security is tied to inflation, in 2023, we each got 8.7% of an increase in Social Security. We were really happy to see the increase. It was a lot more money. Okay? That means that our gross Social Security is much higher, especially if there are two of you, than it was the year before. You get your form called a 1099 SSA for Social Security, and you look at the amount that you got and you say, where'd it go? I don't know. I guess I got it. Okay? What happens with Social Security, and this is something that has never changed, and I do have to say, indicate to you that it has absolutely never changed, is that the way they started in 1982, they wanted to get more tax money in, but it was a recession. So they didn't want to raise the rates. They didn't want people to be mad at them. And so what they did is they decided that they could tax Social Security of people that they said were more well off. And they put in this formula that said, if you take half of your Social Security and all the rest of your income, including tax-exempt income, and if you were single and that amount was over 25,000, then 50% of your Social Security was taxable. Doesn't matter that we paid tax on Social Security when we earned it, okay? But we pay tax on it when we get it. For a married couple in 1982, that amount was $34,000, $32,000. It was 25 for single and 32 for married. In 1992, there was a second recession, and they raised the taxable amount of Social Security for higher income people from 50 to 85%. So that if your income now is over 32,000 and you're single, that's half of your Social Security and all the rest of your income. If it's over 32,000, then 85% of your Social Security is taxable. If you're married and that amount is over 44,000, then 85% of your Social Security is taxable. Those numbers, those amounts have not changed or increased with inflation since 1992. Almost 60 to 65% of people that collect Social Security pay tax on their Social Security. Why is this important for 2023 taxes? I just told you. We're going to see a lot more interest. We're going to see a lot more capital gains. Given the Social Security, we're going to get taxable Social Security. And so it's sort of like a little ripple effect. And so the people, I had a woman that last year, I just did her taxes today. She owed nothing last year. She owed $1,000 this year. When I called her up, and she's in Florida now, and I said, you owe $1,000, Jen. She said, what happened? I said, you earned more interest. It made more Social Security taxable, and you owe more tax. So this is going to be a major problem for many of us. And I don't want you to be surprised. The amount of Social Security increase in 2024 went back down to 3.2%. Okay, so I'd rather have the money, but I don't like paying the tax. So that's something that's changed, and you'll be surprised about it. Okay, something else that's new, and this is important, very important for all of us, is something that's called energy credits. Now, energy credits are credits for putting energy efficient things in your home, such as a furnace, an air conditioner, a water heater, okay, insulation, a roof. All of those things are eligible for what are called energy credits. They do need to meet what we call Energy Star standards. And those are standards that are set by the government. There's a website called www.energystar.gov, okay? And you can look at it, and you can decide when you are in the market for a new something, if you want to pay the extra money for it to be energy efficient or not. That credit used to be really small. It had a certain amount for windows, a certain amount for doors, a certain amount for water heaters, and the max lifetime was $500. So if you got the $500 and you put in all new windows in 2010, and then you came and told me you got a new air conditioner that was energy efficient, I would say to you, you're out of luck. You've already used up your $500. It would keep track of the form on the computer or on my computer. We keep track of what you had before, and it would tell you whether you could get a credit or not. They've changed it wonderfully, and I've got to mean wonderfully. The credit is now $1,200 a year with no cap. So if you decide that you want to put in a furnace or an air conditioner or a water heater or whatever you want to put in, and it's Energy Star efficient, we can fill out the form, and every single year you can get up, there's a certain amount per item, and it varies by item, by windows and doors and other things, but you can get up to $1,200 a year. The other thing that is, I think, very good, it was always just limited to your main residence, where you live in Downers Grove or in Westmont or wherever you are. Now the energy credit is also available to a second home, not to a rental property, but if you own a small little house in Michigan, or you own a condominium in Florida, or you run away to Arizona in the winter, it's all available for that energy credit. But it's called a refundable credit. So it's really, really important. And it's going to be a really big credit. So, and it doesn't expire until 2033, which I probably won't be doing taxes in 2033, but we'll see. Okay, so I can't tell you whether to spend the extra money, but you might want to look at the difference between a non-energy efficient thing to buy and one that's Energy Star compliant, and then see if you can negotiate with the Home Depot or wherever you're going to buy your appliance from. Okay, and see what kind of price you might get. Okay, and they will be happy to tell you. The energy credit does not have income requirements. It does not have income requirements. It's for everybody. It's for everybody. There's no income limitation whatsoever, which is really amazing. There also is, and I'm not going to talk about it a lot here, but I think it's an important thing to know. They're really pushing, besides energy efficient appliances, they're really pushing electric cars. And so the original energy credit for things like Teslas or Priuses, there was this huge $7,500 credit, but it cut off when the sales of the cars reached a certain level. Those credits are back. They're huge. Those do have income limitations by far, but they are available for so many of the electric cars. They're really trying to get us to buy electric cars. They're also available, and there are certain restrictions on how much you can spend, but they're also available not just for new cars, but also for used cars. And they're really trying to get us to buy electric or energy efficient vehicles. Now, I do want to tell you, my son-in-law has a Tesla, and I asked my daughter how we did when it was 20 below, and she said, he took my car to work. Okay, because he was a little worried that his Tesla would have a problem. They didn't plug it in where he worked. Okay, so I think that's an interesting problem, and they do have a complete plug-in setup in their house that they put in for the Tesla. And I think the cars are pretty cool. I don't know if I would buy one, but I think they're pretty cool, and they're really working hard. And I do believe we're going to see many, many more electric cars. I was in Scandinavia last September, something like 60% of the vehicles in Norway are electric. It blew my mind. Are we having trouble with my audio?
Actually, no, I just,
Are you all,
direct
somebody send me
message.
audio. Can you
Um,
hear me?
I just messaged the person, so I'm handling it. I can hear you fine.
As I said, I thought I was pretty high, so we'll keep working at it. If we have problems, we'll see what we're doing. All right. The next thing, and this is another important new thing that I really need you to listen to. You and I and most of our friends in our family have always been very used to having our tax forms show up in our mailbox. We'd go out, we'd get them, we'd have a big envelope, we'd put them all together, and we wouldn't start our taxes until we got all of our tax forms together. Okay, and until probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we all also used to write checks for all our bills. We got all our bills in the mail, we'd look at them, we'd put on our calendar when they were due, or we'd pay them right away. One of the things that's happening to all of us now is they want everything to be done like this through our computer. They want me to get our mail. Okay, they want you to get your bills. They want you to get your investment reports online. They want you to pay everything online. Okay, they want everything to happen online. How many of us really know that we've clicked a little button that says we want to go paperless? And then you wonder why you didn't pay a bill, or you wonder why you didn't get a tax form. Most of the brokerage houses are sending out their 1099s through the computer. And if you forget that you have that account, or if you forget to download it and you do your taxes, you could be in a really big mess. Okay? We are very strongly suggesting that you look at last year's tax return and you look at all the things that you should have and make sure that you have all of your 1099s before you start doing taxes. Beth and I are looking at people's last year's tax return, making a list of all the things they have, and then when we get their stuff, we are making sure that they're not missing anything. Because we really think that there could be major problems, okay, in your tax filing if you're missing something. When I talk about the IRS a little bit further down the line in this presentation, one of the things that happens, every single form that you get, either in the mail or online, the IRS gets. They have a record of every single piece of not your deductions, but they have a record of every single piece of your income. What they do probably a year or a year and a half after that tax season, they match what you have on your tax return and what they have in their computer. And if there's a discrepancy, they send you a notice. It's a notice called the CP 2000. Every notice for the IRS has a number. And it says, this is what you put in, this is what we found, this is where the discrepancy is, this is how much tax you owe, plus penalties, plus interest. And they're very good at that. They're not good at a lot of things, but they're very, very good at that. I have a client who forever will remain nameless. She was horrified. She moved from Oak Park when she retired to La Quinta, California. And somehow she forgot to tell me that before she sold her condo in Oak Park, she took $100,000 out of her retirement account to pay for her place in La Quinta. Did she get a letter from the IRS with a huge bill? She did. She did. We were able to get her out of a penalty because it was a first time occurrence, and she'd always been perfect before. I was able to get her out of a penalty, but the IRS is very good at finding things. We really suspect people have different banks than they used to. They have all sorts of different investment accounts. And so we're real worried that people are going to be missing things. I mean, a really funny thing happened today on my computer, and I've just started working on taxes. I got an email from a broker of a client. I got an email and it said, the next email is going to have a copy of their 1099s. Here's the password. You know, you can download them, blah, 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 blah. Do you know what she sent me? She sent me 2 of them were from 2022. I printed them out. I looked at them. I said, I think they're wrong. We had a caller. She said, oh my God, I guess I did. If we hadn't checked them, we would have put them in the computer as 2023 when they're 2022. So you really need to be very careful about what you're getting. And the IRS is very, very good at that. Okay? So that's really, really important. Number 3, I told you about half an hour or 40 minutes ago that most of us aren't itemizing anymore. Okay, lots of people aren't. They limited the taxes to $10,000. Okay, medical is 7.5% of your income. And most of us aren't giving away huge amounts of charity. We do give away money, but we don't give away huge, huge amounts. However, there's something that's very important. And a lot of people say to me, Judy, why should I add up my medical? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to itemize. And I say to them something very different. I say, there are 2 reasons why it's really important to add up your medical. We're going to talk about itemized deductions. The first reason is that it's really important to figure out what you're actually paying for medical. People are flabbergasted and they wonder why they don't have so much money. Here's what medical includes. Medical includes the cost of your Medicare. It includes the cost of your supplemental insurance. It includes the cost of your drug insurance. It includes the cost of your long-term care insurance if you have it. It includes your out-of-pocket medical, maybe doctor's bills. It includes eyeglasses. It includes out-of-pocket hospital. Okay? It includes, and this can be very large, it includes out-of-pocket dental. Most of us don't have dental insurance, and even if we do, it doesn't cover very much. About a year or 2 ago, I went to the dentist and he looked at me and he said, I think you need an implant. And I said, oh, really? And how much is an implant? And when he told me how many thousands my implant was going to be for one, I choked. I have a client with 10 implants. Okay? He or she had to pay them all. They had 10 implants. The cost out of pocket was outrageous. The other thing in medical that isn't covered by insurance are hearing aids. Okay? And so you would be surprised if you added up all your out-of-pocket medical expenses, where your money's going. That's where it's going. Okay? It's huge. Now, I can't tell you what kind of medical insurance to get, and I won't. Sometimes I look with clients, but I need to tell you honestly, and this is not a tax thing, but this is from my head and my heart, that I have a lot of clients that say, I can't afford this, I'm going on a Medicare Advantage plan. A Medicare Advantage plan is cheaper on this side of the coin. You pay less for premiums. So if you're healthy, it works really well. But if you get sick, it has out-of-pocket deductibles on this side. It has out-of-pocket copays on this side, and you could wind up paying a fortune. So I'm not telling you whether to do it or not, but I've had clients that save money over here and pay huge amounts of money over here. So one of the things that's really important is just to look at how much you're really paying for medical insurance. I have clients, a lot of the long-term care policies that used to be relatively inexpensive now have escalator clauses, and they go up 10 and 20 and 30% a year. Okay? And so I'm not saying whether to have it or not to have it, but you really need to look at what you're spending. And I have a lot of clients now that have huge amount of medical. On top of that, there's another part of medical that's absolutely huge. And that part of medical is called long-term care. Long-term care includes the care for a person if they can't do 2 of 5 activities of daily living. So if you move to a retirement home and you are in independent living, you might have a buy-in where part of it is medical, but otherwise often not very much of it is, maybe a little bit. If you go to assisted living, a lot of your medical is deductible, as a lot of your monthly expense is deductible as medical. If you are in an Alzheimer's unit, or you can't do 2 out of activities of daily care, then 100% of your medical is deductible as a medical expense. I have people in nursing homes with $70,000 and $80,000 of out-of-pocket medical expenses. And then they don't pay very much taxes, but their medical is huge. And it's really important to look at what you're spending, and then you'll know where your money's going. I have one client in the city that is not as healthy as she was last year, and she moved from independent to assisted living. Her cost per month went from $3,800 to $6,800. $6,800 times 12 is over $70,000 a year. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So it's real important. If you get money from, yes, okay, somebody else mentioned, and this is true, you can take transportation and parking costs for medical visits, dental visits, I didn't mention prescription drugs, but all of your out-of-pocket drug costs are deductible. Even if you went, and I did this once for my husband, because of something he had, we went up to Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester, Minnesota. The cost to go to Mayo Clinic is deductible. The airfare, the hotel, the out-of-pocket food when you are away from home for medical reasons are all deductible. If you have an ambulance and you pay an ambulance, that's deductible. If you take a Lyft or an Uber for medical reasons, that's deductible. God, Ubers and Lyfts are pretty expensive these days. So again, some people say, I don't want to be bothered looking at this, okay? But it's real important to look at it to see what you're spending, and you'd be surprised. I have a client who called today, and she hadn't filed for several years. I just did her, and she discovered she had a piece of land, or she knew she had a piece of land in Florida, okay, that has been sitting there for years. And she thought it was worth $15,000. Well, she found out it's worth 40, whatever the piece of land is, and she's going to donate it to a church. She will get an appraisal, and she will get a donated value of $40,000, which for that year, 2024, it will help her on her income tax. So it's real important to look at these kinds of things. Again, when I talked about qualified charitable contributions, we do a lot of the tax planning between QCDs and whether you're going to give the money from charity or not. You can also give money in charitable contributions, which for some people is a good idea. If you have a stock that you really don't know, right? Somebody just said, I have a husband in memory care at a cost of $9,000 deduct a month. It is all deductible. Okay, 9 times 12 is how much? Oh my God, I'm afraid to add it up. It's $108,000. So all of that is deductible if you're in memory care. Now, I do want to tell you something else about this medical that's real important. I have clients who say to me, I know that this is real expensive. 108,000, most of us can't afford. Okay. So if I'm going to have somebody help my wife or my husband in the house, you know, I know a friend that knows a friend, and it's cheaper than hiring an agency to have somebody in the house. So I really am going to hire Joan. Okay. And she's probably about 60% of what an agency costs. And agencies are very expensive these days. They are. I work with people with agencies all the time. There are a couple of issues related to paying people cash and not agencies. The first one is if you pay an agency, the person is declaring the income. You can write it off. If you get a doctor's letter and you say the person can't do 2 out of 5 activities of daily living, you can write off the expense as a medical expense, okay? Because the person is paying tax. If you have a person that's in your house that you are paying cash to, and that person doesn't report the income because they really don't want to report the income, they want you to give them a check or they want you to pay them in cash, then you can't write it. I can't write it off, and you're not supposed to write it off as medical. Okay, because it's under the table. There's something else that's also really important about this, and I need to say this loud and clear. I have a client, or I had a client, whose mother had somebody, thank God, from an agency, and the woman fell down the stairs going to the basement doing the laundry. There was liability and lawsuits all over the place. And the insurance from the agency, plus the person's homeowner's insurance, covered all of it. It took 4 years to settle it. They covered it all. If you pay somebody in cash and they get hurt, you're out of luck. You are totally out of luck. So it's real important to figure out one way versus the other way. I have a client, and if I have a client that wants somebody, okay, and they're paying them, we tell them that they can do the following. We can issue them what's called a 1099. I can get the person's social security number and their name, and we issue them a form called the 1099 self-employment form, and then they have to report the money. I have one client, it's a long-term client, and we had a big discussion with her son, and we did that, and it was fine until she got the 1099, and you know what she did? She quit. She quit. She quit. And now he's paying cash. Okay, so yes, you can only deduct $10 a night for hotels if you went to Mayo. It's $50 a night for hotels. That's the max. So yes, that's correct. It's $50 a night for max for hotel costs. Somebody asked, but all the transportation is deductible. So those kinds of medical things become really, really important. You'd be surprised. And I tell people to make sure that they figure out their medical, because if you wonder where your money's going, and you don't have very much money, it's going to medical. So even though, and you might do something else. I said I had somebody with a really big dental bill. They didn't pay half of it in 1 year and half of it in the next year. They paid it all in 1 year so they could take the deduction in that year. And so there's a lot of tax planning in there. And actually, the dentist was pretty good. He gave them a break to get a lot of the money up front. So we didn't have to worry about collecting the money. So they actually paid less for their dental bill because they paid the money all at one time. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. So I think I want to go back and I'll answer this question that somebody asked about home sales, because, and then I'll go back to what the IRS is doing. A lot of people, including me, lived in their home or are still living in their home for a really, really long time. If you drive by my old house in Downers Grove, I bought it for I and my ex-husband bought it for $42,000. Okay. It was about a year old and the people moved, and okay, way back in 1969, I think it was 42 or 43,000. And yes, we fixed it up. We redid the kitchen and we redid the bathrooms and we, put on furnaces and roofs and other things. Okay. But we sold the house for a lot of money. Okay. And so here's what the IRS says about home sales. And this is an important thing. Okay. And maybe in a way, it's a good thing we live in Illinois and not in California when I tell you this. So here's what happens with home sales. One, you start with the closing statement, with the selling price. You subtract all the expenses of the sale, and don't die when you see how many expenses there are. There's title fees and real estate commissions and a million other things. That gets us to the net selling price. That's over here. Then we start on the other side with what you paid for the house, my $42,000. And then I get to add all of the what's called capital improvements, okay, that make the house more valuable. There's an important distinction between an improvement and a repair. Okay, it has to make the house be worth more, okay, than it would be if we didn't do it. So you add up your original cost plus all the improvements. The tax name for that is called basis. The difference between the net selling price and the basis is the profit for IRS purposes. And you'll need your closing statement because there are lots of things on there that you can deduct. Okay? What the rules for the IRS, which I think are pretty good, is that if you're single and your quote profit is less than 250,000, then you don't have to pay any tax. Doesn't matter whether you roll it over into another house or not. If you're married and your profit is less than 500,000, then you don't have to pay tax on it. Okay. Somebody asked a question about what happens when my spouse died. I'll answer that in just a few minutes. And so, again, if you have more gain than that amount, then you have to pay tax on it, but you pay tax at long-term capital gains. Okay? Okay, I will answer some more questions in a minute. Okay, you pay tax on it at long-term capital gains. Most people I know don't pay taxes on their house. Now, I just told you the good lady that I was, sold my house. You're going to laugh. I posted on the Downers Grove Parents Facebook page. Was I allowed to say that I was thinking about selling my house? One person came to look at it. I had one offer. It was way more than I thought I was going to get. and I sold it at list and I didn't have to fix it up? Did I have more than $250,000 of gain? I did. Was I happy to pay the tax? Maybe I wasn't, but I did. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, there is an interesting problem, okay, and I'll just tell you what it is from a real estate point of view. A lot of people are scared to sell their houses because they don't want to pay tax. Imagine if you lived in California and you bought your house 30 years ago for this, and now it's worth this, maybe $1 million or $1.5 million or 2 million. Okay? By the time you finish paying the IRS tax and California tax, which is a flat 9.5%, you might as well stay in your house. A lot of people are staying in their house because they're too afraid to sell and because their house is their home and they've lived there forever. Okay, and so there is often a shortage of new houses for people to buy. Okay, so there are a couple of questions that I want to answer with this. The first one says, my husband died in October. Do not intend to sell within 2 years. Should I get an appraisal for a realtor? So here's what happens. If you jointly owned a house, the house in Downers Grove was mine. My second husband sold his, but when we got married a long time ago. But if you own a house jointly, okay, half of the house is yours and half of the house is his. When somebody dies, stocks and things like houses get what we call a stepped up basis, which is equal to the fair market value of that half of the house. So the question is, should I get an appraisal for a realtor or from an appraiser for the value of the house on the date of death? I will tell you that in general, I usually use a realtor's appraisal. If you have a really good one, the IRS is not going to go back and question you. But if you have that, you get a stepped up basis for only his half of the house. But then again, if you don't sell it, you only get $250,000 of gain as an exclusion, which might not be a problem if you get a stepped up basis. Okay, so I would say find a good realtor and get a complete appraisal listing from a realtor with comps and just keep it with your tax stuff if you're not going to sell. All right, and I think that's an important thing to do. But also, and this gets back to what happens when somebody dies, if you own stocks, they also get a stepped up basis to the fair market value of the date of death. So if the stock is in just one name, then you step up 100% of it. If it's in 2 names, you step up 50% of it. And that's when somebody dies. So that would work. Okay. The second question down here has to do with itemized deductions, and it is, how much can you deduct for itemized deductions in Goodwill Salvation Army? Well, we used to spend a lot of time worrying about this. We don't so much anymore. I'll tell you what the law says. The law says that it's worth what you would get if you sold it at a garage sale. Okay? We're going to take another half an hour, so we're good till at least 8 o'clock. So what a lot of people say, well, you know, I gave away $500. Okay, I'm not going to stand there and itemize every little thing that you gave. And in general, most people don't have enough to itemize now anyway. But in general, I would tell you, I mean, when my husband died, we gave away bags and bags and bags and bags of stuff, and I took the max of $500. Now, I just told you that I have a woman with a piece of land in Florida, And if she's gonna give land away, she has to get an appraisal. If you give a car away, you donate a car, which a lot of people want you to do, you get a value from the car from the dealer or CarMax or wherever you give the car to, and we can take that. But if it's other than cash or other than a check, then we should have some sort of backup. And there's a form called an 8283 to document what you're doing. I have some people that gave books to the Newberry Library, big fancy old history books, or they gave antiques, and we get an appraisal. But for Goodwill or Salvation Army, I would say to put $500, they're not going to question you if you itemize. And as I said, most people don't itemize anymore. So it's important. Okay, I think that answers some of those questions. Now, let's get back to the home sale for a minute. Okay, I've talked about your home, that it's your principal residence, which means the home you live in. If you have a second home in Wisconsin, a ski place in Boyne Mountain, Michigan, a summer home in Florida, and you sell that house, it does not qualify for the exclusion. I'm going to say it again, it does not qualify for the exclusion. So I have a new client who owned a condominium in Florida for a long time. They went down there in the winter, and now they've decided they're moving permanently. And so they're selling their they've already sold their condominium, and they're building a big house. They're going to sell their house in someplace in the western suburbs. They have a huge gain on their condominium. A huge gain on their condominium. It's taxable federally at 15%. The condominium is in Florida. There is no state tax in Florida. Where is he going to pay state tax? Because where does he live? He's going to pay state tax in Illinois at 4.95% on the gain. And I went and figured it out to figure out what he was doing. Okay, so at least he knew what he was liable for and how much money he would have from his condominium sale to pour into the new house. So we know what the tax bites were. Now, if you owned a second house in Michigan or Wisconsin or Colorado or wherever you owned it, those states have state income taxes. So we have to file a tax return with the income that was earned in that state, pay taxes on that state, and then get a credit for the taxes paid for that state in Illinois. And I have lots of people that are thinking about simplifying their lives and are selling their second homes because they're not driving there, they can't be bothered, the kids really don't want them, okay? And so they're doing those. So the home sales, and the IRS hasn't questioned those, okay? But those are important things to know. Now, the last thing about home sales, and this is important, let's assume you had a rental property, okay? And the rental property, you got rent, you filed a rental form, and every year it got depreciated, okay? We have to subtract from, quote, the basis, the depreciation that was always taken on that rental property. So, oh, this is quite a long time ago, and you'll know the little house. It's a house, it's just on Curtis Street. It's a two-story house just west of the library. And the people inherited it from his parents. They rented it out for 20 or 30 years. It was fully depreciated. When they sold the property for $300,000 or $400,000, how much of it was taxable? 100%. They thought they were going to get upset, but they got the tax value at the depreciation all the time they owned the house for every single year, and they didn't pay tax on all of it. So a rental property works different than a principal residence. And as I said, if we go back to the medical, an awful lot of people, they think about selling their house and they look at the cost of a retirement home. This woman was saying $100,000 a year. Even if you're not in dementia care, it's often 60 or 70,000, and maybe it's better to stay home. Maybe it's better to stay home. Okay. I think there are two other things I want to say. I want to tell you what the IRS is doing a little bit. The IRS actually got $80 billion in 2022. The IRS, believe it or not, was still using software and hardware. They were tinkering around with the software, but they were using software and hardware from 1996, which is why things were so difficult and why they had millions and millions and millions of tax returns and responses to notices that took a year to get processed. If I'd send in a letter, I'd call and I'd call. Often I never got through during COVID, especially. And it might take a year before I got things finally finished and processed with the IRS. They are now getting new hardware. They are now getting great new software. They are now hiring more agents to help you on the phone. When I call the IRS, I don't have to stay on hold for 2 hours. I actually get through between 10 and 20 minutes. Okay, but I used to be on hold and often cut off for an hour or two, and maybe I would never get in. So it would be a problem. I have some people's letters that I've sent in, okay, and we get a little letter and said, we know you sent it in May, but we need to tell you we need at least another 90 days before we can review it. Okay? And so I tell the client, don't worry, I'm sure we're going to get your penalty abated, but I'm going to keep track of it. Beth and she sends me wonderful little emails and says, don't forget to call the IRS about so-and-so. It's been 2 months. And I go back and I try and call them. So they got this $80 billion. Okay. And I also, one of the other things that's very cool, and I've been able to do this for quite a while now, I'm an enrolled agent, which means I've passed the IRS test and can do anything that a CPA and an attorney can do, and I do with the IRS on your behalf. But if you give me what's called a power of attorney form, I have a client that hadn't filed for 3 years, a lady that wants to donate this land. And I was able to get every single one of the income items from the IRS on my computer. It's called e-services. And I can communicate with the IRS from e-services. So it's better often to hire somebody that knows, whether it be me or somebody that knows what they're doing to get you out of a problem. But the IRS is doing better at it. They're also, for the first time in their entire life, beginning to scan tax returns and notices. I have, and I don't know, I suspect that most of you are pretty tech savvy. I only have one client that absolutely refuses to have me e-file their tax return. Okay, sometimes their things don't get processed for a year. Things that show up in paper take forever. Now at least they're beginning to scan, okay? And so they are. But if you get a letter from the IRS, one of the good things, if you have somebody that's a good tax person, I can usually get you out of a penalty. The IRS doesn't allow you to get out of interest because they're interest that they charge because you had the money that they should be able to get. Okay, but I can usually get people out of penalties. And I will honestly tell you, that's why, especially this year, we're really scared that we're not gonna have all the 1099s from people. And so we're being incredibly careful because it would be better for you to make sure on the front end that you have everything. You get a letter from the IRS and you get hysterical. Actually, I'm gonna end with this because I think this is probably a pretty important thing to end with. There is a lot of identity theft. People, you know about it. People try and get your credit cards. They charge things on your credit cards. They try and hack into your computer. They send you emails, and if you open them, God forbid, you're in trouble. Okay? They tell you not to open attachments. There is a huge amount of identity theft. People get your personal information. They file phony tax returns. They collect refunds. You go to file and they say, sorry about that. Somebody already filed with your social security number. It's called identity theft. The IRS has been working very hard to combat identity theft. And one of the ways that they do that is that if you have identity theft or you're worried about it, there's a place on the form that you can get from the IRS what's called an identity protection pin. It's called an IP pin. And so the IRS knows that it's you that's filing. And if they get another tax return with the same social security number without an IP pin, they reject it. That's the good news. The bad news is every year you have to get a new IP pin. And you have to get them online from the IRS. There's a whole process to do it. I had somebody 2 years ago. The wife didn't know the husband got one, and they didn't get one before they came to see me. I thought she was going to kill him in my office. He couldn't figure out how to get the new one without me. He came back and I had to charge them to help them walk through it to get the new one. It's really important. There's a place to put it in there. And you never really know. I'll kind of end with this story. This is a really weird story. This is a client that I have. I inherited them when his parents died. And I did their tax return for a couple of years. The first year, I e-filed it. It was relatively complicated. I e-filed it and it got rejected. And I thought, oh my God, what did I do? Oh my God, what did I do? Okay, I didn't do anything. There was nothing wrong with their tax return. About a week later, she calls me up. They live in Peoria, Illinois. And the parents lived in Downers Grove forever, his parents. She called me up and she said, I just have to tell you what happened. I said, what happened? She said, I work for, what's the college in Peoria? I don't remember now. Whatever it is, somebody hacked into the college computer and stole people's social security numbers. And the president got fired. And most of the people, lots of the people from that college in Peoria had their identity stolen, and we had to send in their tax return and paper. So I can't begin to tell you how careful you need to be. I think the last thing I want to say to you about this, and this is, I'm not young and I'm still working crazy hours, but this is an important thing no matter who does your taxes. And I need to say this clearly. I'm on my main computer in my office in Chicago now. I have an IT person. I have huge amounts of firewall in my computer. I have a private cloud. I don't have a cloud for my software. I have a private cloud that I buy. I have huge amounts of security protection insurance, like $3 million. If somebody hacked into my computer, all of your personal information is vulnerable. I am vulnerable. I'm at risk. You need to make sure, okay, that the person that's doing your taxes has them protected and you protected. If you sued me, I could lose everything that I've worked 50 years for. Okay, I wouldn't be very happy, but I'm incredibly careful with each one of you. If I'm sending something to each one of you, it goes through my computer, password protected, just like I get things from brokers. Okay, it's not so easy to open, but I won't do it unless I do it that way. Any piece of information that I send to a client now goes FedEx because I don't dare trust the Postal Service. Okay, everything comes, we send you a tracking number, we call you if you send things to us and let you know that we've received them. We are incredibly, incredibly careful. Okay, somebody asked one more question and then I'll stop. I don't need the RMD money that I take this year. Thinking of putting most of it in a Roth. Is it a good idea? I will answer that question in general and not in specific. There is a tax law that says you can take your IRA money and roll it into a Roth. A Roth is an IRA where you paid the money up front, and then when you take it out, it's not taxable. So it grows tax-free, okay? And so in general, if you're younger, putting money in a Roth is a wonderful idea. You paid the tax on it, and like my grandkids are in their 20s. It can grow and grow and grow and grow and grow for 50 years. And when you take it out, you never pay tax on it. Okay? If you put your money in a Roth now, you're paying tax at the highest, it depends how much you need, at the highest tax rate, your highest marginal tax rate. In general, you're not putting enough money in a Roth to make a difference. And we're often at our age too old to have it grow for a really long period of time. I think the idea of having Roths, and I'll give you 2 stories about them in a minute, are great. I think they're wonderful, especially for younger people or people that have had Roths a long time. And if your kids inherit a Roth, they don't have to pay taxes on it. They do have to pay taxes on an inherited IRA, as I was explaining before. My feeling is, if my kids inherit my money, they can pay tax on it. It's okay. I don't need to pay tax for them. They're doing really fine. So I'm going to give you 2 last stories and then you'll get a kick. So I have one client and she rolled her money into Roth long before I knew her. In 1986, when the stock market tanked, she has $3.5 million in her Roth. She rolled it over here and it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew from 1986 to now. Okay, most of her money is not in regular IRAs, it's in Roths. Okay, that's client number 1. Client number 2 is somebody that I helped. And this is an interesting example. Before she started taking her Social Security, she's a widow. We rolled over a little bit in her early 60s from an IRA to a Roth, so her income was really low. She's a very good investor. Most of us aren't. I'm not. Okay? She invested a huge chunk of her Roth IRA in a NASDAQ stock that I never heard of until she told me about it. It's called NVIDIA. NVIDIA has grown 267% in the last 2 years. She just bought a second house in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with money from her Roth of profits with 0 tax. So I think it's a good idea if you plan it properly, okay? I think if you find a good tax person, whether it be me or somebody else, what I do is I run the numbers with people and say, this is what the tax you would pay. How long do you think it might take you to make up that money? And then you can make an informed decision. I think the other informed decision, which I won't have time to talk about because it's 8 o'clock now. But it is an important one, is when you take your Social Security. I have discussions about people all the time, whether they take it at 62, whether they take it at full Social Security age, or whether they wait till 70. And that's a really important discussion to have. But one of the things, if you have a good tax person, then you can run the numbers and say, here's one option, here's the second option, here's the third option, and then you can decide what you want to do. I think you've asked really good questions. As I told Karen earlier, if you have a question that's a general question and not real specific, I would be real happy for you to call tomorrow. I will be in my office. I'm in the office all the time. We took my Downers Grove number and ported it to a cell phone. That's the 630-964-4018. My Chicago number is 312-988-9996. Call and I will be happy to. I do send out news. Some of you have been coming all the time. I used to send out newsletters by snail mail to everybody that came to a workshop. We're not doing that anymore. But my website, which Karen might put up or you can find, is www.strausstax.com. The latest newsletter, the winter 2024, and the ones for the last 2 years are on my website. You're more than happy to download them and print them. And we still have a lot of people here. I want to thank you very much for coming. And good luck.
Thank you so much, Judy. One person did actually private message me and just asked if you are taking new clients.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah. So yeah, so I agree with what someone else said, which was you are so smart and savvy, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I've hosted this with you for 6 or 7 years, and I've learned something every year. So thank you, everybody who attended. This has been recorded. I will be sending out the link to everybody in a day or two. Judy, thank you again. It's great seeing you. Everybody have a good night.
Bye.